Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's going on in their own individual businesses and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. But before I introduce the panel, I'd just like to thank our fantastic sponsors, which are Hazelwood's, Advisors, and Accountants. And unfortunately, the news nowadays is not free. We do need all our backers and advertisers, and I can't thank them enough. So anyway, let me say a big thank you to them, and let me introduce you to the fantastic panel. We've got Ian Mean, Director of Business West, Vice Chairman of GFirst LEP, ex-Vice Chair of GHURC, Gloucester Heritage Urban Regeneration Company. He is the ex-editor of the Citizen and Cheltenham Echo, the Western Daily Press. And Ian, what other hats do you wear?
That's sort of about it, really. I'm also very interested in music. I'm president of Churchtown Male Voice Choir. I don't sing, I would hesitate to say. And also president of a ladies' choir. But I'm also interested in health service. And I chair the Organ Donation Committee for Gloucestershire and 10 other trusts from here to the Isle of Wight. So, yeah, that's of great interest.
No, I thought we'd get that in for you as well. No, thanks ever so much to come on the show here. We got Matthew Burke, he's principal of St Edward's Senior and Junior School in Cheltenham. You've got 150 staff, a turnover of 10 to 12 million pounds and 650 people. So welcome to Matthew, first time on the show. We got Imam Hassan, the CEO of the, I like to refer him to, of the Masjid-e-Noor Mosque. That's Ryecroft Street Mosque in Gloucester. He's a fantastic member of the local community. He's a good friend of mine as well. So thank you for joining us again, Hassan.
Thank you.
And we have Serena Gay, founder and MD of Made4U Podcasts, former BBC radio journalist. She worked at BBC World Service in London. She's also a rather talented voiceover artist, as I was listening to her last night. So anyway, let's get on with the headlines quickly. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and go to courtesy of the BBC. Here we go. The Eye. Every home's get £400 cut in energy bills. The Daily Express, Rishi's £1,200 boost for 8 million. The Daily Telegraph, Tories now the party of big spending, says Sunak. The Daily Mail, Rishi's 21 billion splurge. The Times, Tories split on tax and spending bonanza. The Metro, Rishi to the rescue at last. The Mirror, about time, Rishi. The Guardian, Sunak unveils £115 million package of support after windfall tax U-turn. And the Financial Times, once again, Sunak's £5 billion windfall tax U-turn. And then finally, the Daily Star, Valdi held Jez, world gone free. Right. Don't you just love the Daily Star? Anyway. Let's get on with Ian Mean. Ian, thanks for joining us, mate. You used to be editor of lots and lots of newspapers. Let's be honest, the fun part's always right in the front page, isn't it?
Absolutely. Today, they're all on really the same story. This is the windfall tax that Rishi Sunak doesn't call a windfall tax, a complicated term involving levies. But, you know, simplicity-wise, you read out the Eye main headline on their splash, every home to get £400 cut in energy bills. And then the Daily Mail, Rishi's £21 billion splurge, bracket, but when will Tories get back to just cutting tax? Now, that's something that is a bit of a thread through quite a lot of the papers at the moment. Also in the Mail, there's a piece by Alex Brummer. He's a very well-respected city editor. Rishi's just given us a fighting chance of avoiding recession. But of course, the Mirror takes the Labour view, about time, Rishi. And it's true to say that Labour have been hammering on about a windfall tax for some time. lot of money here, and I think there's real concern among the commentators. One of the best is James Forsyth. James is political editor of the Spectator, and he's written in the Times under a headline, Sunak's splurge will buy him only 6 months. I think that's right. This is almost an election giveaway, Mark, really. And the Times and the Telegraph actually say this is all very well following Partygate, but it's a huge amount of money. He's going to be able to look for election giveaways as well. So lots and lots of money there.
I think you're being kind. I actually think it's a dead cat on the table moment to move away from Partygate. It's just let's just do something to change the headlines, change the narrative, and I think
we didn't realise that the amounts of money would be so huge, despite the delays.
The story I just want to add to that, by the way, is that, do you know, if you own 2 houses, you still get the £400 each house.
Yeah.
If you own 3 houses, you still get the £400. So you could actually make £1,200 if you own 3 homes. And guess who owns 3 homes? Rishi does. Let's move on. Serena, let's go over to you. Thanks ever so much for that, Ian. What have you picked out from the papers, please?
Well, just quickly on the tail end of what Ian had to say. I mean, it is true that that Rishi's announcement yesterday has knocked the Sue Gray report right, you know, into the background, and so maybe it's had the effect that the government were hoping for. And the fact that 5 Tory MPs came out yesterday and said that they were, you know, they were going to require Boris Johnson's resignation, that doesn't really seem to have taken much in the way of headlines this morning. So yeah, so it looks like the government has managed to achieve its aim. So my story, the story that I spotted and wanted to talk about, a little bit off piece, nothing to do with the sort of the major headline, is that medical consultants are going to be redeployed, or at least that's the NHS plan, that they're going to be redeployed from the hospitals to the community to sort of bolster the current GP surgery provision, which is failing because fewer and fewer GPs want to be working full time in that role, and so not enough provision is being made for people. And apparently this is going to be introduced into the most deprived areas, this idea, by April of next year. So it's a real goer. It's going to happen. And it reminds me of when I lived in Germany, which I did for 20 years. This is how the Germans do it. You know, they have their consultants in the community. You can get an appointment with a consultant the week that you need it. And it's much more expensive being ill in Germany, believe you me, than it is in this country. And the NHS has a lot to say for itself, but having consultants more readily available will assist the whole business of course it will, of keeping people healthy. So I think that's a positive, and that was a story that caught my eye.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Do you know, I used to live in Berlin as well.
No, did you really, Mark? When were you there?
For 3 years, 1978 till 81.
Wow, when the wall was still up, that must have been quite something.
I went through Checkpoint Charlie every couple of weeks when I was a kid, yeah. And on the train as well. We used to wave at the Russians, wave our cigarettes, wave our apple corn. Anyway,
yeah, well, let's hope we're not heading to a world that's similar to that, but anyway.
Which is a lovely link to Matthew, because I was in school at the time. And I was caned. I was caned 3 times for smoking, fighting, and drinking. Not that I'm very proud of all these things, but it didn't do me too bad. Okay, I have this bamboo fetish now that I don't talk about. No, that's a joke. Matthew, welcome to the show. What have you picked out in the papers, please?
Just a couple of stories, actually. In The Guardian, there was an interesting take. Actually, it builds on Ian's conversation around the windfall tax, and actually there's a piece in The Guardian that says it's actually a missed opportunity. I took an interest in this. One of my other roles, I sit on the steering committee of the Cheltenham Education Partnership. So that's all the schools in Cheltenham coming together. And a big thing we're looking at the moment is change makers. So around climate, sustainability. We had a green day here yesterday around that. And the piece says actually it's a missed opportunity to tackle the root cause. not just of the cost of living crisis, but also the climate crisis that we're in. And so perhaps if that windfall tax, or however it's phrased by Rishi Sunak, was a little more, it could have been used to help with insulating homes. It could have been used to kind of generally tackle issues around the climate crisis, not just that short term and severe as it is cost of living crisis. So that was an interesting take on that process yesterday. I suppose being in education, I'm always thinking about role modeling and how we behave and how we act. And it's a difficult line, because I try never to kind of comment on political issues, but it's a real challenge at the moment, being honest, talking to the students, talking to everyone else about values, about culture and about ethics. And putting Partygate aside, there was an article in the Times actually around the MP Claudia Webb, who's now an independent, that's obviously been suspended from the Labour Party, but not really doing what I would say the right thing, the honourable thing in terms of stepping down. You've been convicted of something. Technically now, because the sentence was reduced, it doesn't quite hit that criteria for a recall vote. But, when we're trying to inspire our young people to be public servants, to take, to do the right thing and to look to leaders to do the right thing, it's just a little disappointing and challenging, I suppose, as a leader of a school, to see these stories coming up on a fairly regular basis. And if I could sneak one more in, if that's okay, this is a personal one, and you'll know this one, Mark. There's an article in the Telegraph around train delays. And actually, it's an interesting point. It's saying that train delays there's 8% more complaints this year. Trains are late 8% more than this time last year. And I perform a few roles with national associations, which necessitates my travel. And I always try and do it by train, because I think it's the right thing to do. But last Monday, I was meant to be in London at 9:30, tried to take the first train from Cheltenham, and that was delayed by 45 minutes. And I had an hour delay on the way back. And it's deeply frustrating, because we want to do the right thing. We're trying to do the right thing, but we need, again, to have that infrastructure, to have that structure there. So, Serena, interesting. I used to travel a lot to China. I was head of a school in London, and we had an international section. And my goodness, if you're, the doors close a minute before the train is due to leave. It arrives 2 minutes before it's due to leave, and it leaves on time, and it works incredibly well. So, yes, we have lots of things to be proud of, but perhaps that's another thing that we need to do to ensure we're doing the right thing.
No, lots of good points taken there, Matthew. I could go on about the trains myself for quite some time, but we are short on time, so that goes over to Hassan. Thanks ever so much for joining us again, Hassan. Right, okay, what have you picked out for us?
So there's an article in The Guardian. It's on local food banks. So an anti-poverty campaigner, Jack Monroe, says, because people cannot afford to turn on the hob because of higher energy bills, people are going to food banks and demanding items that could be eaten cold. Rather than have ready meals that need to be warm, they ask for ready meals that are cold, so that they can save money at home. And there was also an article in one of the newspapers last week stating that NHS staff are actually looking for handouts within the hospital for themselves, because they feel they're not taking home enough money. So it's quite a sad state of affairs that this is what's going on in many households up and down the country.
No, without a shadow of a doubt. And do you think, that the £400, a house of £1,200, will that have a massive impact, do you think?
It will help. It will definitely help the working class. I feel through handouts, there's always a negative impact later on. And the people that suffer most are the middle class. They will feel they're working very hard, not appreciated, and because of higher taxes that they would need to cough up later on, their taking home salary will be very, very low. The upper class, they will feel something slightly, possibly. The working class, obviously, the government are trying to support them, but I feel the middle class, there's a huge number within that category, are really going to suffer over the coming years.
There's going to be a big squeeze, isn't it? A massive squeeze in the middle class. And of course, this money's got to be paid back. it's not free money. It's got to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from all of us, isn't it? No, I totally agree. But something had to be done. Something had to be done. The narrative had to be moved. And thanks ever so much for that. And that goes very nicely back over to you, Ian. So obviously you wear lots of hats, mate. Business West in particular as well. What's the general gist out there in the news sphere that you're talking to?
Right, I was at a Bank of England panel meeting in Stroud yesterday. Melindy Myers, who's the regional agent for the Southwest, was talking. General feeling is that a lot of our businesses are doing pretty well, but the biggest issue is recruitment. Matthew will find that. And I was talking to Matt Burgess, the principal of Gloucestershire College, the other day. They're actually, Mark, cutting some really interesting courses like construction because they can't get the right teaching people. Now, this is a major, major problem. So recruitment in all our surveys generally is the big thing, really.
Yeah, no, without a shadow of a doubt. It's every single business I talk to, it's all about the recruitment, and it's really, really affecting the bottom line now, because the harder you work, the more people want more money. If you've got less people, they want more money for it. It's quite simple as that, and costs are going up. What about GFirst LEP? Because they've got a bit of a problem as well. They're getting squeezed, aren't they?
Yeah, all LEPs are in the same situation. I think GFirst LEP, I'm not blowing our trumpet. I think we do pretty well out of I think it's about 40 odd in the country. We're sort of ranked about number 13 or so. But all of us have had large cuts, nearly 40%. Now that is going to have a real effect. I'm particularly interested in young people, education, apprenticeships, getting into work. So what's going to happen now, Mark, is that government monies are going to come through the county council to district councils. So we're talking to district councils about services involving young people. I'm looking at a thing called the Employment Charter, which Matthew might be interested in. It's a very simple idea, really. We want to match schools with local businesses. It does happen, doesn't happen enough though. So we're looking at that, but things are tough.
Without a shadow of a doubt, and I think they're going to get a lot tougher. You know, don't want to doom and gloom us, because I think it's very important to stay positive. I do think, although they keep talking about a cost of living crisis, I actually think there's a cost of media crisis, where the media keep banging on and banging on and banging on about the cost of living, and they're going to scare people away from spending, and that will have a massive effect to the economy. Maybe the £1,200 might help. I don't know, but that's my view. Thanks ever so much for that, Ian. Serena, wow, okay. I mean, you do all these podcasts. You know, from the pandemic, they really took off, didn't they?
Yes, I mean, I was saying earlier that I think prior to the pandemic, part of my role, or a big part of my role, was going around evangelizing about the value of podcasting, and having to talk to business groups about why they should have one. And people would look at me and go, yeah, but what is a podcast exactly? And where do I find one? And, you know, it was just a foreign language, I think. So the pandemic helped in that people suddenly had time to experiment, to find out stuff. And that meant that when we came out of all our lockdowns and so forth, people were thinking in terms of how can we present ourselves in a more cutting edge, more thrilling way. And podcasting, you know, was right up there. So I did benefit. It was a silver lining for me, although I know, of course, that it was a tragedy for so many other people. I'm not pretending that it wasn't. But for my business, it helped a great deal. Was
there a particular sector that really took off for you? Was it right across the board?
Oh,
individuals?
Right across the board. It's just unbelievable, the scope. I mean, church groups, charity groups, fintechs, venture capitalists, market researchers, non-profits, PR agencies. I mean, the list just goes on and on. There's not, it's simply not a particular industry. It's across the board.
But there is also, just like anything really, there's good and bad, isn't there?
Well, yes, there is. And of course, I have.
Are you honest with people? Are you honest with people and say, Serena, look, I'm very sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, but this ain't gonna cut it?
Well, no, I don't do it I don't put it like that. When people come to me with an idea, I go, yeah, but why don't you also look at it from this angle? You know, how about doing something a bit different because other people are already doing this? So I try to inspire people to come up with ideas that are a little bit off the wall. And one of my favorite clients does a podcast which she calls, she's a PR practitioner, PR, not BS, because she's a direct speaking woman and she wants to get straight to the point. And that's what I love. I mean, because it's a little bit different. It's a little bit cheeky. And, you know, it's what podcasting is all about.
I love the way you leant into the camera then to say cheeky. That's quite cheeky as well. Anyway, go on then. Top three tips very quickly. Podcasting.
Top 3 tips for anybody who wants to start a podcast. I would say that you need a decent mic. A decent microphone so your voice comes across well. You need to know your audience so that you pitch correctly, and get a professional to edit your recordings for you.
That is enough for such a blatant pitch. Okay, thank you very much. Lovely work. Come on then, Matthew. Lovely to have you on the show. Let's talk about St Edward's School.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a wonderful small community in Cheltenham. We're a Catholic foundation, but we're about 25% of our pupils and staff are Catholic. But I think it's one. I mean, we moved here 2 years ago. So I was director of education for a group of schools in London, having been ahead of 2 schools in North London before that. And it wasn't necessarily a desire to move to Cheltenham. Although lots of people have done that since the pandemic, but it was the job. It was St Edward's. It was a community for us. So I suppose what I've learned being in Cheltenham and Gloucestershire is that there's just so many fantastic, wonderful schools, and the reason that we're all here and the reason that we all are still here is that we're all slightly different. So, you know, our academic results are fantastic, but we get those without putting too much pressure or too much stress on the students. You know, our fundamental ethos and aims is to have a pastorally strong school. If you've got children who feel happy, who feel supported, who know that the teachers know them, know how they learn best, that's when they're able to kind of fulfill their potential. But I also am very honest with parents and say, look, if you leave St Edward's with just GCSEs and A-level results at 18, then we failed you, because we're preparing students for life after school. And so, you know, for us, university is a destination that lots of our students do, but we're trying to encourage them to go down the apprenticeship route, the degree apprenticeship route, school leavers programs, or even straight into employment if that's right for them. And I think, you know, being relatively small as we are, it means we can provide that personalised approach for not just the students, but the parents, you know, as well.
I think one of the things that Ian and I find, and maybe hopefully the others do as well, not hopefully the others do, is the soft skills that kids don't have anymore. They can't answer the telephone. You know, they're some, you know, this is not to generalize it, but the work ethic, getting up on time, just the ability to communicate. You know, those basic skills just don't seem to be there with this generation.
I think
I think it's cruel. Am I being too harsh there?
I don't know that you're being too harsh, because I hear the same thing all the time from employers as well. I think schools generally are under huge pressure to secure academic success, because that's the route that parents will look at when deciding which school they want to send their children to. And if you set yourself up as a school whose raison d'etre, whose main selling point is the results, you kind of have to do that. I'm lucky here, and you know, St Edward's isn't unique in this, but I'm lucky that that's not the reason necessarily that parents choose to send their children to St Edward's. They want that all-round education. Yeah, we entered into a partnership with High Performance Learning, which is really interesting and perhaps a topic for another conversation, because I could talk for hours on it. But in essence, it's picked 30 we call them behaviours for learning. They call them values, attitudes, and attributes, but it doesn't quite slip off the tongue as easily as behaviours for learning. And it's things like empathy, it's collaboration, it's teamwork, it's concern for others. And we're building that into our curriculum so that when they leave us at 18, they've got all of those things, that they're able to do that. We've also introduced this year the Ivy House Future Leaders Programme for our sixth form students. And it's a 20-week programme basically around reflection upon them as leaders. What type of leader do they want to be? What careers would play to their strengths as leaders? And it's just fantastic to be able to have that and be able to bring it in. Well,
no, that's amazing, Matthew. Yeah, I'd love to chat to you more about that sometime as well. But we're running out of time, and I don't want to leave Hassan out, because Hassan, thanks again for waiting patiently there. When we spoke last week, you and I, we were talking about the rise, the amount of people that you've got coming to the mosque.
I can't put my finger on it, but we were slightly skeptical and afraid that during lockdown, people would disconnect from their faith and the numbers would go down. However, we found in the past 5 or 6 months, the numbers attending the mosque have actually increased. And I've got no reason why. I've not done any research on it. But to give you an idea of how busy the mosque is, Friday is our special day of the week. At 1:30 p.m. this afternoon, we'll have roughly over 700 people attending the Friday prayer. And like you said earlier, we have roughly people from several different professions and industries attending the mosque. We've got takeaway workers, restaurant workers, taxi drivers, nurses, doctors, surgeons, lawyers, accountants. So it's a very good place to network. So if anyone wants to network, come to the mosque on a Friday.
So yes, it's certainly gone up, isn't it? And you've got a way of tuning in to every single house as well, haven't you? You could do your prayers.
So every Muslim household in Gloucestershire, they buy a receiver, which is a one-off purchase, which costs just under £100, and they can tune into every service that takes place at the mosque. So as soon as we put the switch on at home, automatically the signal is picked up at home, and the receivers would turn on, and they would tune into lectures and fundraising events and all sorts from home.
Because I mean, that is the fundamental thing. The way the mosque has to be run, isn't it? Is about a membership. So how is it financed?
So mosque, obviously, we've got regulars that donate. So people who turn up day to day or week to week, on Fridays, they would give a few pounds or £5 or £10. And if you were to add each person's donation, and let's say 700 people were to donate £1 or £2 or £5, that then adds up each week. And then we do encourage people to become members at the mosque. We've got a good few hundred members who pay a one-off fee of £80. I think it's an annual membership fee that they pay. And then obviously there's other ways of generating income as well. So it's got a good model, the mosque at the moment, and it's self-sustainable, and hopefully it'll be there long term.
Well, the thing about it, it's all about leadership at the end of the day, and you are the leader of the mosque and the community. Has there been a fundamental shift back to in the Muslim community of re-engaging and getting out there? You know, how is the business community there in Barton Street and around the area?
Everyone I speak to, they say they're extremely busy at the moment. So we've got families who run several different businesses around the city, and everyone I've spoken to, they're looking to employ more people. But it's not, what I'm finding is they're finding it difficult to employ the right person. They want to employ people, but you've got to get the right person in order to benefit your business, and that's where we're at the moment.
Yeah, it's exactly what Ian was saying earlier, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you do, where you are, it's just trying to find the right people at the moment. Okay, thanks very much. We're kind of coming to the end of the show. I just want to quickly show something, because we've talked about the newspapers, and I forgot to mention this, was that this is the story. I'm just going to go back into the screens again. Hold on a second, where it's the gallery. This is a story that appeared in the Daily Mail. This is a Japanese chap. Can you see that? He likes to dress up as a dog. It just tickled my funny bone in this world that's gone crazy. Anyway, right, Ian, what's caught your eye this week's punchline?
Right. Can I just say before that, it's great that Hassan's on, because I'd like to talk to him about organ donation. There is a major issue with the Asian community. There's a dire shortage of organs for that community. Hassan is obviously an imam who's got a broad some broad thoughts in this area. Some imams do not. So I'd like to talk to you, Hassan, about how we can develop something together there. It's a really, really important situation.
Definitely, we can discuss this later on, straight after the show.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. No
worries.
And
when I come to see you, perhaps we can have a more detailed conversation. My story, Mark, is something you ran yesterday about GE Aviation, of course, based in Bishop's Clee, big employer, testing an engine using 100% sustainable aviation fuel. This is a huge, huge issue. We've been doing work on hydrogen, and I see that Airbus, actually, a story in the Western Daily Press today, are launching a new research hub into hydrogen. The aerospace industry, and it's massive in this county, are really into this sustainable flying, and GE very much one of those leaders.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that really caught my eye, and couldn't agree more. Serena, what have you picked out for this week's Punch?
Well, funnily enough, it follows on from the aviation theme that Ian has just mentioned. And it was your story, I think, from yesterday. And by the way, I absolutely love your lunchtime bulletin that comes in at that time. It always just makes my afternoon to start off by reading it. So thank you. So it's Gloucestershire Airport, the busiest in the country. The busiest small airport in the country. But what pleased me was to read that we could see a return to passenger flights to the Channel Islands and large UK cities. I thought it was such a pity when it ceased to operate those, and it would be great if we could return to it. But sort of within that framework of a story, you also reported that Karen Taylor, the managing director of Gloucestershire Airport, said, "We're home to the first electric aircraft being built here." So we all have to keep an eye, right, on the environmental damage that aircrafts and the airports are responsible for. But if Gloucestershire Airport is at the forefront of work to make it more sustainable, particularly with development of electric aircraft, that's very exciting for Gloucestershire.
Totally. Thank you very much. Matthew, what's got your eye in this week's Punchline?
I was also interested in those flights to Jersey. We actually lived and worked in Jersey. Our youngest was born over there, so the ability to get there a bit easier. But there was a piece you ran earlier in the week just around the shake-up of the Gloucestershire cabinet. And it's great, you know, that people get recognised and have the ability to take on those roles. But it just, and you know, the two that you mentioned, Councillor Houston and Councillor Morris, you know, congratulations to them on the new roles that they have. But it just got me thinking around wanting to recruit good people or encouraging people to take on those roles around councillors, whether it's local, town, parish or county council as well, and having the right people with regards to those. I think one of the frustrations, if I just talk about education for 1 second, is on a kind of national level, you have secretaries of state who come and go and don't necessarily have the expertise or the background in the areas in which they are. And I think sometimes it's useful just to reach out. And it's great, actually, with Gloucestershire and certainly here in Cheltenham, the councillors who have responsibility for me, for example, with education, do reach out. They do have those conversations, and that's really encouraging and positive. So it was just that wanting to ensure that we're doing the right thing by our councillors, encouraging the right people to do that, but also congratulations to those people who had secured roles in the cabinet.
No, thank you. And thanks for mentioning that as well, because not being funny, there aren't many other news outlets that actually go into the sort of local politics that we do as well. You know, and when Ian knows this, if you cover a political story or get a press release from somebody from a political party, it's just their viewpoint. And so what you have to do is then go back to other parties to get their viewpoint. And for a story with a very limited, shall we say, audience, takes 2 or 3 times longer to actually put together. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So thank you ever so much. Hassan, what have you picked out for us today?
Celebrating the Platinum Jubilee at the Gloucester Cathedral to commemorate the 70-year reign of Her Majesty the Queen. They're running several activities through the half-term holidays, which is the entirety of next week. So they're running dozens of activities for people of all ages. In our community at St. James Park next Sunday, we've got a day filled with fun activities celebrating the Platinum Jubilee. And at our local faith school, Al-Ashraf Primary School, yesterday, the whole day was dedicated to celebrating this Platinum Jubilee. So the kids were told to come dressed in Union Jack colors, so red, white, and blue, and it was brilliant seeing hundreds of children dressed up. And all the activities they were completing was to increase their knowledge on the Queen.
That's absolutely fantastic. Great to hear. If you could send me some details about the park, we'll publicise that for you, mate. Anyway, let's the stories that caught my eye this week in Punchline was actually my visit to the Colford Sundori food and beverage factory in Colford. You know, Ribena and Lucozade to you and me. I had the pleasure of being shown around the factory for a 2.5-hour tour, meeting some of the movers and shakers there. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely, it was absolutely blew my mind away. And the fact that they are one of the very first companies in the world to produce 100% recycled bottle that actually gets reused and reused and reused. The biggest problem that we got in this country is that there is not enough of us doing that. But one of the things that did come out my little trip there, which really surprised me, was that, do you know that Wales has one of the highest recycling in the world, are known for it in the world. So I thought that was an unusual thing that came out of it. Everyone go. Yeah. Anyway, the new headquarters of ProCook, fantastic local companies doing really well. And again, Gloucester Food Dock is moving forward. So I'm very excited about that. Anyway, that's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank our fantastic panel. Thanks for joining us today. Our brilliant sponsors, Hazelwood's Business Advisors and Accountants. And don't forget, if you enjoy the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And just like to say thank you very much. Until next time, be safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.